Before we get into this, I need you to sit with a question. I say that a lot. Sit. Think about the last time you wanted someone that didn't want you back. The way that felt, the quiet, gnawing desperation that settled in your chest and wouldn't leave. The stories you told yourself late at night about why you deserve them, why they'd be better off with you if they just opened their eyes, why, if they give you one real chance, they'd finally see what you saw. Now think about how far you would have gone if you could have guaranteed the outcome. If there was a button, a real mechanism, something that could make them feel exactly what you felt. That intensity, that pull, that need. Would you have pressed it? Most people would. Most people would sit there and rationalize it in their heads. It wasn't really hurting anyone, right? They just needed a chance. The feeling would become mutual eventually. This was love after all. Love justified a lot of things when you're in the inside of it. That's Bear Bailey, and that's exactly why he's one of the most disturbing characters I've analyzed on this channel. I'm lying. I always say that. It's not because he's over the top monster, because he's not, because he's recognizable. And some of you are going to sit down with this film thinking you're watching a horror movie about a cursed object, some supernatural trinket that ruins lives. And you're going to miss the fact that you're actually watching a horror movie about a person, a very ordinary, sympathetic, very dangerous person. Curtis Barker's Obsession dropped in May 2026, grossed $333 million on a budget under $1 million, and became the highest grossing film in Focus Features history, and they deserve it. The internet has been in a full-blown war ever since about what it actually means. Half the comment section swears Nikki is the villain. She's the one with the body count, the blink eyes, the knife, the dead cat, the whole terrifying package. The other half points at Bear from the beginning and calls him the monster he always was. The discourse is everywhere, heated, personal, and almost all of it is missing the clinical layer that makes this film genuinely terrifying on a level that stays with you. That's what we're here for today. I'm opening the file on every major character in this film, layer by layer, and by the end of this, you're going to know exactly who the villain is. And I promise you, it's not the answer most of you think it is when the credits roll. Let's lay this out clean before we go anywhere else, because the plot details matter for the psychology. They matter a lot. Bear Bailey works at a music store in this small, comfortable social world that feels lived in and real. He's got his friends around him, Ian, Sarah, Nikki. He's quiet, a little awkward, genuinely likable on the surface. He's the guy in the friend group everyone thinks of as harmless, the one who'd give you a ride home without being twice, remember your exact coffee order, show up when you needed him. He's had feelings for Nikki Freeman, his childhood friend, his co-worker, for what appears years. And here's the first thing I want you to really clock, because it sets up everything that follows. He never tells her, and that's annoying, not once. He gets multiple opportunities, quiet moments where the door is open. Barker even confirmed in interviews that Nikki would have been open to exploring something more. My husband and I disagreed on this because he also said what Barker said, and I adamantly said no. She friend-zoned him. No means no, but I guess my husband was right. So yeah, I should have watched the interview with Barker that he confirmed that Nikki would have been open to exploring something romantic if Bear had just been honest with her. But Bear doesn't do that because Bear isn't actually afraid of Nikki. He's afraid of rejection, and those are completely different fears. Being afraid of Nikki would mean you care about her response as a person. Being afraid of rejection means you care about protecting your own outcome, your own feelings and narratives. So instead of having a conversation like a human being, Bear wanders into a crystal shop and buys something called a one-wish willow.
They only get one wish. I wish Nikki Freeman loved me more than anyone in the entire world.
This novelty toy from the 1960s that promises to grant one wish when you snap the branch. So he buys it and breaks it. And he wishes that Nikki Freeman would love him more than anyone else in the whole world. And it works instantly. Nikki transforms. She's at his door the next morning, devoted, warm, physically affectionate, completely focused on Bear in a way that, for about 5 minutes of screen time, looks like pure wish fulfillment fantasy. Then the cracks start showing. She's too devoted. She can't stop. Her personality, the real Nikki, the funny, sharp, creative woman who wanted to become a writer, who had her own dreams and her own plans and her own life, started disappearing. And in her place is something else. Something exists for one purpose only, to love Bear. But what she actually is, clinically and narratively, is the physical embodiment of what Bear wanted. He didn't wish for a relationship. He didn't wish for Nikki to be happy or fulfilled. He only wished to love him more than anyone else in the world. And the one wish Willow gave him exactly that, and stripped out everything that made Nikki a full person to make room for it. The real Nikki is still in there. She surfaces occasionally, terrified, begging Bear to kill her and set her free. She's screaming on the other end of the customer service line when Bear calls to ask how to undo the wish. She's conscious, she's trapped, and she could feel everything. Meanwhile, Nikki starts killing people. Sarah gets her head caved in one of the most visceral scenes I've seen in a long time. I liked it. Ian gets shot. The body count climbs. And Bear, and this is the part where the film wants you to really understand, Bear keeps the wish going for a significant portion of the film's runtime. He looks for workarounds. He asks the customer service line if there's a way to dial back the intensity rather than just cancel it entirely. He tries to find a second wish to soften the edges rather than undo the damage. He doesn't want to let her go, even after people are dying, even after the real Nikki begs him to end it. Even then, some part of Bear is still trying to keep what he made. The ending is tragic in a truest sense. With no way out, Bear overdoses on oxycodone, the same pills that killed his cat, knowing that his death is the only thing that would break the spell on Nikki. And then in the last minute, Nikki finds another one wish willow, and instead of using it to undo his wish, she uses it to wish that Bear would love her back the same way she loves him. The wish activates just as Bear is dying. For a few seconds, they're together, genuinely, mutually in love. And then he's gone. You didn't know this. Nikki, faced with the prospect of surviving without him, puts a gun to her head. The theatrical cut has her surviving what we saw. The real Nikki breaks through at the last second and stops herself. She's left alone, surrounded by the wreckage. I like the theater version better. The question the film leaves you with, the one that an entire internet is fighting about, is this: who is responsible for all of this? Who's the villain? Let's open the files one by one. Bear Bailey, 20-something, quiet, soft-spoken, immediately sympathetic. The film does something very intentional how it presents him. Barker shoots the first act in a way that invites you to root for Bear. He's the underdog. He's the nice guy who can't catch a break. He practices his lines for talking to Nikki in the mirror. He buys her crystal because hers broke. He's dorky and earnest and harmless, except he's not. Let's start with the psychology actually tells us about Bear, because this is where the film becomes more than just a horror movie. It becomes a mirror. The nice guy schema. There's a well-documented psychological pattern in the research literature. Glick and Fisk's work on benevolent sexism, Gilmore and Brown's research on entitlement in romantic pursuits, that describes sometimes called nice guy syndrome. And I want to be careful here because it's a term that gets thrown around loosely online. Clinically, what we're actually looking at is a specific constellation of beliefs. The belief that performing kindness and devotion towards someone creates a social debt, that the debt should be repaid romantically, and that if it isn't, the person who was nice has been wronged. Bear operates entirely within this framework. He gives Nikki rides home. He remembers things about her. He shows up for her. And in his mind, and this is the part that's never stated out loud, but it's written in every choice the character makes, he believes that this earns him something, that his feelings are so legitimate, so large, and real that they override what Nikki wants. That the universe owes him a yes because he's been so devoted. When the universe doesn't deliver the yes, he doesn't accept it. He finds a supernatural mechanism to force it. That's not love. Let me say that clearly as a psychologist. What Bear has for Nikki isn't love. Love, genuine attachment love, the kind Bowlby and Ainsworth spent careers describing, is characterized by care for the other person's well-being, independent of your own gratification. It involves wanting the other person to flourish, even that flourishing doesn't include you. Bear's feelings fails that test completely. It's selfish. What Bear has is obsessive attachment, a fixation on Nikki as the solution to something inside him. She's not a person to him. She's an answer. She's the thing that will finally make him chosen, wanted, enough. The research on limerence, Dorothy Tennant's work from the late 70s, updated by more recent researchers, describes exactly this. Limerence is an involuntary obsessive state of romantic fixation that's distinct from love. It's characterized by intrusive thinking about the target and an intense need for answers, and the fundamental inability to accept the other person's reality as separate from your own fantasy of them. The limerent person doesn't fall in love with who the other person actually is. They fall in love with the version of that person that they've constructed, a version that is perfect, available, and destined for them. Bear doesn't know Nikki. He thinks he does, because they grew up together, and he's cataloged every detail about her. But knowing someone's coffee order and knowing who they are as a full human being are not the same thing. He's never asked Nikki what she wants. He's never had a real conversation with her about her dreams or her fears or her world. He watches her and orbits her, and he's decided without her input that she's the one. That's limerence, not love. There's one scene in the session that, as a clinician, made me pause. It's the scene where the real Nikki surfaces while her body is asleep. She speaks to Bear quietly, terrified, exhausted, and trapped. And she begs him to kill her, to end it. She said she'd rather die than continue existing the way she is. Bear's response is anger. He gets angry that she would say that. He frames her request to be freed as a betrayal, as if her not wanting to be a prisoner in her own body is a rejection of him personally. That moment is the film's thesis statement, because what Bear reveals in that scene is that his concern was never for Nikki. Not really. His concern was always what Nikki provided him. And when the real Nikki, the person underneath the wish, expresses a need that conflicts what Bear wants, his first feeling isn't compassion. It's not horror at what he's done to her. It's offense. How dare she want something different than what he decided she should want? That's not a nice guy who made a terrible mistake. That's an entitled person whose mask slipped. The TV tropes page for this film describes Bear as a villain protagonist, and it's correct. He's the character we follow, the character we're positioned to sympathize with, and he's responsible for every death in the film. Ian is dead because of Bear's wish. Sarah died because of Bear's wish. Nikki's soul was stolen because of Bear. And Bear knew people were dying and kept trying ways to keep the wish going and not undo it. What's the diagnosis? Clinically, Bear presents with a cluster of anxious, preoccupied attachment style with limerick fixation and entitlement features. This isn't a personality disorder diagnosis. It's a pattern, an attachment pattern formed probably in childhood, or when love felt conditional or scarce, that calcified into an adult belief that you have to earn love, that rejection is devastating, and that the other person's autonomy is less important than the security of having them. If you want to know more about this, listen to my podcast. It's on Spotify and here. So I talked about all of these. The research on anxious attachment, Hazan and Shaver's foundational work, Bartholomew and Horwitz's 4-category model, consistently shows that anxiously attached individuals experience love as urgent and consuming, have difficulty tolerating uncertainty in relationships, and are prone to behaviors that seek to reduce uncertainty by controlling the relationship's outcome rather than tolerating the vulnerabilities of genuine connection. Bear couldn't tolerate the vulnerability of telling Nikki how he felt and risking to know, so he found a way to eliminate the no, and in doing so, he eliminated Nikki. Now here's where it gets complicated, because Nikki is the one with the body count. Nikki is the one doing the stabbing and the shooting and the killing. And the film knows that a significant portion of its audience is going to look at freaky Nikki and call her the villain. It's designed to produce that reaction. Barker deliberately made Nikki terrifying. The wardrobe shift, the blank eyes, the way she moves, the way she stares. Every horror convention in the film is attached to Nikki's body. And that's the trap. That's the trick Barker's pulling. Because Freaky Nikki, the entity doing the killing, isn't Nikki. She's the wish. Let me say that clinically. What the one wish will produce isn't Nikki Freeman making choices. It's an entity that was created by Bear's desire and exists entirely to fulfill it. It doesn't have autonomy and self. It can't consent to anything because it was conjured from the template of what Bear wanted, rather than from who Nikki actually is. It's the physical manifestation of Bear's fantasy of Nikki, fully devoted, incapable of leaving, incapable of wanting anything for herself. The real Nikki, the person underneath, is a victim. Full stop. She's the "and I must scream" trope made flesh. Conscious, aware, trapped, watching her body do things she would never do, unable to stop it except in brief terrified flashes. She begs for death. She screams on a customer service line. She services for seconds at a time to communicate her suffering, and then gets pulled back under. Here's the psychological framework that's mostly useful for understanding what happens to Nikki. dissociative identity, specifically the forced fracturing of selfhood under conditions of extreme violation. The research on dissociation, Vander Kolk's body of work, Herman's Trauma and Recovery, describes how under conditions of severe trauma, the self can fragment. One part continues to function in the external world while another part of the self is hidden, conscious but inaccessible, screaming from somewhere the outside world can't hear. Nikki's experience in this film is the horror version of that clinical reality. She didn't dissociate from trauma gradually. She was violently split in an instant by someone who decided his feelings mattered more than her existence. And yet the film is designed to make you afraid of her, not of him. Her. Think about what that says. Think about how that mirrors reality. And if you're a female or even a male that had someone who is obsessive, stalking, you understand. In the real world, women who are controlled, isolated, and turned into instruments of their partner's desires are often read as the problem. Their erratic behavior, the crying, the instability, the desperate acts becomes the evidence of their dangerousness. The thing that was done to them becomes their character flaw. The person who did it to them remains sympathetic, well-intentioned, just a guy who made a mistake. Barker built that dynamic into the film's visual language deliberately. The camera stays with Bear. We see the horror through his eyes. Nikki is shot like a threat, and every convection of horror filmmaking trains you to fear the threat and trust the point of view character. Except the point of view character is the one who created the threat. Let's talk about the end again, because it's the most psychologically complex moment in the film, and almost every review I've read gets it wrong. Nikki finds the willow. Bear at this point has overdosed and is dying. She could use the wish to undo his wish. She could use it to free herself. Instead, she uses it to wish that Bear would love her back the same way she loves him. People read this as Nikki being broken, as the wish having so thoroughly corrupted her that she can't even save herself. And there's truth in that. The entity that's been running her body for days is something that exists entirely for Bear. Of course, it uses its one wish on Bear. But here's the clinical layer. Nikki's final wish is also the only moment in the film where someone makes a wish that's genuinely reciprocal. She doesn't wish for Bear to love her more than anyone in the world. She doesn't wish to own him. She wishes for mutuality, for the same thing. She wishes for love actually is, not control or possession, guaranteed devotion, but the same feeling, equal in both directions. It's the wish Bear should have made. It's the wish would have been love and not theft. It's the real Nikki making it, or combination of Nikki and the entity that's replaced her. That's what I think. In the last seconds she has, and it's too late. That's the tragedy underneath the horror. The genuine version of what Bear wanted was possible. He could have had it. He just would have had to risk asking for it. He would have had to sit with the vulnerability of not knowing and let Nikki choose freely. And he couldn't do that. He bypassed her choice entirely, and everyone, including him, paid for it. Ian doesn't get enough attention in this discourse around this film, and that's a mistake, because Ian is doing something very specific narratively, and the film uses him as a dark mirror for Bear. Ian and Nikki had a history together. They hooked up on and off over the years, and he didn't say anything to Bear. He actively encouraged Bear to pursue Nikki. He pushed Bear toward the confession that he was too scared to make on his own. On the surface, that looks like a good friend. But think about what Ian is actually doing. He's managing Bear toward a resolution that would conveniently remove the complication from Ian's own romantic landscape. He's not helping Bear out of selfless friendship. He's helping Bear because Bear pursuing Nikki and getting rejected or getting accepted, either way resolves the situation for Ian. Ian's wish when he finally gets his hand on a one wish willow is for $1 billion, which is smart. Not to save Nikki, not to help Bear, $1 billion for himself. Right in the middle of a crisis, though, where people are dying. It's the cleanest possible character reveal that the film has. The moment Ian, when he has supernatural power, he uses it entirely for himself without a second hesitation. And then Nikki shoots him. In the film Twisted Logic, there's something almost just about that. It was because the film was consistent. Everyone who treats the situation as something to be navigated for personal benefit pays a price. Sarah is the moral compass of the film, and she's the most heartbreaking character in it because she does everything right and it kills her anyway. Sarah had feelings for Bear. The film makes it clear, but look at how Sarah's feelings operate compared to Bear's. She doesn't manipulate or scheme. She watches Bear pine for Nikki and she steps back. She allows Bear the space to feel what he feels and make his own choices. She expresses concern about Nikki's behavior and is one of the first people to flag that something's wrong, that Nikki needs help. She tries to protect Bear even when he won't protect himself. The contrast the film draws between Sarah and Bear's approaches to love is so clean, it should be in a textbook. Sarah loves Bear with secure attachment energy. She holds her own feelings, respects his autonomy, doesn't try to engineer the outcome. Bear loves Nikki with anxious entitlement energy. He can't hold his feelings or tolerate her autonomy, and it engineers an outcome that destroys everything. Sarah is killed by the wish Bear made, not by Nikki, by Bear's wish, operating through Nikki's body, and she never did anything to deserve it except be honest about her feelings in a way Bear couldn't be. There's a part that most people skip, and it's the reason this film is going to be studied for a long time. Obsession isn't a film about a cursed object. Curry Barker said it himself. The object isn't cursed, the wish is cursed. And the wish came from a person, so the film is about a person. Specifically, it's about what happens when someone treats love as something they're owed rather than something they build. And it uses supernatural horror to make that dynamic impossible to rationalize or excuse. The research on what makes intimate partner violence so insidious, Evan Stark's coercive control framework, Lundy Bancroft's extensive clinical work with abusers, consistently identifies one core belief underneath all of it: the belief that the abuser's need for the other person supersedes that person's right to exist independently. It doesn't start with violence. It starts with the belief that your love for someone gives you authority over them, that your feelings about them are more important than their feelings about themselves. That's Bear. That's exactly Bear. And the one wish Willow just made it visible. It made it impossible to miss. And in a real relationship, Bear would have been the guy who called 40 times when you didn't text back, who showed up at your workplace, who told all your friends you were together before you agreed to it, who slowly, over time, made you smaller and smaller until the only thing that defined you was your relationship to him. Those behaviors are rarely called villainous. They're called, he just really loves her. The film strips that excuse away by making the process instantaneous and physical. There's a concept in the attachment literature called Object constancy, the capacity to hold a full complex three-dimensional understanding of another person that includes both their good and their difficult qualities, and that survives the person not meeting your needs in any given moment. Healthy love requires object constancy. It requires seeing the other person as a whole human being, separate from yourself, with their own needs and desires that may conflict with yours, and choosing to love them anyway, choosing the relationship over the control. Bear has zero object constancy for Nikki. He has an idealized, constructive version of her that he's in love with. The moment the real Nikki, the one with her own plans and own timeline, doesn't fit into Bear's frame, he doesn't update his frame. He updates Nikki. That's the horror. That's always been the horror. The one wish Willow just made it literal. Let me give you the answer I promised. The villain is Bear, unambiguously, legally, morally, psychologically, narratively. Bear is the villain of this film. He made the wish. He's responsible for every death. He continued the wish even after people died, and even after Nikki, the real Nikki, begged him to end it. His anger of her begging is his final confirmation. He's not sorry for what he did to her. He's sorry it's not working the way he wanted. But here's where I'm going to push further than most analyses of this film goes. Because I think the most important thing about Obsession isn't who the villain is. It's why so many people watching it instinctively call Nikki the villain, or call it complicated, or say it's morally gray. Because it isn't morally gray. It's genuinely not. Bear made a wish that erased a person. That's not gray. The reason people call it gray is because the film replicates the exact psychological mechanism that makes real-world coercive control so hard to identify and prosecute and stop. It happens from the perspective of the person doing it. We live inside Bear's experience. We feel his loneliness, his anxiety, his love. We understand his logic, and we're trained by horror conventions to fear what he fears, which is freaky Nikki. Barker built a film that makes you complicit in Bear's worldview for most of its runtime, and then, if you're paying attention, shows you what that worldview actually produces. The complicity is the point. The discomfort when you realize you're rooting for Bear is the point. The sick feeling when you clock that the girl you've been terrified of this whole film is a victim. That's the whole point. Vessel Vandercloak, that trauma robs people of the sense of having a self. That when someone's autonomy is systematically dismantled, they lose access to who they are. Nikki Freeman didn't just lose her freedom in this film. She lost herself, her ability to make choices, to want things, to be afraid, to say no, all of it stolen. And the person who stole it looked like a nice guy the whole time. That's the most frightening thing in this movie. Not Nikki's blank eyes, the head smashing, or anything. The most frightening thing is Bear practicing what he's going to say Nikki in the opening minutes of the film. In the cozy, familiar way, Barker shoots it. Like we met this person before. Like we know this person. We do know this person. That's what makes him the villain. Dread scale. 5 out of 5. And I don't give that out often. I'm not giving it a 5 for the gore, though the head scene is genuinely one of the most... That's the best thing I've seen in a while. I'm not giving it a 5 for the jump scare. I'm giving it 5 because this film will make a specific kind of person deeply, personally uncomfortable in a way they can't shake. And that person is the target. The horror of obsession isn't supernatural. It's social. It's the horror of recognizing a logic you've encountered before, maybe in someone you dated, Maybe in someone who dated you. Maybe, and this is the one that's hardest to sit with, in yourself, in a moment where you wanted someone enough that their wants felt like an obstacle. When the story you told yourself about your own feelings was so convincing that the reality barely registered. Curry Barker made this film for under $1 million and 26 years old, and it will be studied in film schools and psychology departments for decades. That's a five. That's what a five looks like. My husband and I were always a fan of That's a Bad Idea. That's their YouTube channel. And it's really special to see how far they come. Here's what I want to leave you with. Bear Bailey isn't a unique person. He's not a freak. He's not an outlier. He's what happens when the cultural story we tell about love, that persistence is romantic, that devotion earns you someone, that if you want a person badly enough, the universe would find a way, gets taken to its logical end without any ethical friction slowing it down. He's every I just love her so much used to justify not listening to her. He's every but I'm a nice guy used to explain that she owes him something. Nikki Freeman wanted to be a writer. She had dreams, she had a future, and a self. And all of it was taken from her by someone who loved her so much she couldn't let her choose. That's what obsession actually is. It's not passion or devotion, the refusal to let the other person be a person. The film is called Obsession. The title is about Bear. It was always about Bear. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did you walk out of this film thinking Bear was the villain? Or did it take you until the real Nikki asked him to kill her? Fear is the only honest thing. Thank you for being here.